Hey, wow, look at what the chaos of the last 2 fucking years, I think, made us almost forget to do, huh? Well, the upside is, since this past year I mainly ended up running reviews when I wanted to review something, this is a lot easier to put together since only one thing on this list this year I didn't get a review posted for yet, which means this can get put together mostly via bite-sized version of the reviews themselves from the big screen. So yeah, before I make you wait all the way into goddamn March, let's do this. Number 10. The Suicide Squad. Conceived in the aftermath of both its own studio releasing a chopped-up version of what probably wasn't that great of an original film in the first place, part of the ongoing rolling fallout from the disastrous beginning and even more disastrous attempted midway course correction of the early DC Universe franchise, and rival Disney's similarly shameful, though now thankfully corrected, firing of director James Gunn over a fake outrage campaign generated by right-wing political operatives. The movie, though, it's pretty alright. Yeah, this guy should have been a general for this kind of ability to manage other people's bullshit in a crisis, I'll tell ya. The whole enterprise really does feel like an ensemble piece, with the main characters all getting a solid balance of exposure and depth once it's sorted who the main characters actually are, though it's quickly apparent that our hero part this time goes to Idris Elba as Bloodsport, a ruthless mercenary assassin who pulls increasingly absurd weapons out of thin air like a high-tech Elmer Fudd, while doing an otherwise dead serious riff on the world-weary gunslinger bit opposite Joel Kinnaman, returning as field leader and exposition guy Rick Flag, returning only thing we did right in the first one, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, Daniela Melchior as Ratcatcher 2, aka the weird cute one who says weird cute things, David Decimal Kane as a sad sack polka dot man, and full-bore comic relief in the form of John Cena's ideologically confused Peacemaker, and the aforementioned Stallone as the instantly iconic Nanaue, aka King Shark, who is a shark.
So smart, me.
He's strong and deadly.
He has very kind eyes.
Hungry. Bird. And
Yes, that is your hand. Very good.
There's quite a bit to recommend here, even if it's not the strongest work from anyone involved. The action sequences are big, nasty, and inventive, the mix of old-school over-the-top bloodshed and modern comic book absurdism is consistently impressive, and while the two Guardians films are in no danger of being dethroned as Gunn's most impressive work as the Mr. Emotional transcendence of mainstream pop superhero cinema, it's nonetheless compelling to see him and the actors draw out real humanity in the talking shark man, the girl who talks to rats, or the sad weirdo whose seemingly laughable power of throwing polka dots at people is revealed as a gradually more brutally sad, debilitating condition as the story wears on. Number 9. Nobody. This year's top contender for the title of best movie that the worst guy you know will agree with you is one of the actual best movies this year. Put another way, screenwriter of John Wick, director of Hardcore Henry. Yeah, pretty much. It's completely comfortable in its own skin as a middle-aged guy wish fulfillment fantasy with the bass turned all the way up, where the fantasy part isn't simply an everyman getting over, but that the everyman isn't an everyman, but an exceptional badass who knows it and is really just putting up with everyone's bullshit, answering the factory default moral of every hero's journey narrative of the last 40 years or so, that the power was inside you all along, with a triumphantly sarcastic, yeah, I know, no shit. But it's Bob Odenkirk that holds the entire presentation together, though, in a film mostly free of gimmickry apart from its, oh by the way, special set of skills backstory. The omnipresent spectacle of one of modern pop culture's great naturally weathered sad sack, effortlessly snapping between broken man and breaking men, while also looking absolutely convincing as a killer elite, as opposed to just giving him cartoon super strength or extreme martial arts skills, and turning things into a total farce. It's a real marvel of character work, and it elevates what's otherwise aiming for Father's Day Steelbook Blu-ray Walmart perennial, and make no mistake, if any of this sounds even a little bit good to you, Father's Day came early this year, into something that suggests, if he wanted it, that Odenkirk could make a real go at the genre as our first true successor to Die Hard era Bruce Willis in over 30 years. Number 8. Free Guy. Well, fuck me, this is 1,000 times better than it needed to be.
Is this what recreational drugs feel like?
A clever, highly polished surprise that's the big-hearted, feel-good summer blockbuster that audiences have been begging for all year.
I know this world is just a game, but this place, these people, that's all I have. What if we can save it? We can change our world, but we have to fight together. I don't even know what's happening right now, but I love it! Woo!
But this is exactly the style and quality of movie that people like Jim Carrey and Mike Myers were using to print their own currency back in the 90s and early 2000s. A lot of the credit is going to go to Reynolds' star power, Comer's star-making turn, and a bunch of really killer gaming and pop culture gags, especially in a big final battle scene that people are probably going to go nuts for. But what had me genuinely elevated walking out of this one was how uncynically, sincerely, and successfully positive it was. This is a real home run and proof positive that Reynolds is capable of much more than Deadpool. Free Guy is funny, heartfelt, exciting, endearing, and the best love letter from Hollywood to video games since The Last Starfighter. Number 7. Eternals. Movies that take creative risks, make big swings, do things that are different, and don't necessarily try to be all things to all people by definition are not going to work from every subjective point of view just as often as they're not going to work period from every objective sense. Because hey, sometimes a big risk doesn't actually pay off all the way. Where my opinion may differ from yours or others, on a case-by-case basis of course, is that even when something doesn't work for me, if it's still interesting, I often land on the people should see this side in some respect. I hated Joker, but it's inarguably an interesting artifact. I'm pretty mixed on Dune, but I respect what Villeneuve is trying to do with it, and I'm glad people are giving it a chance because it's not a safe cookie-cutter blockbuster at least. Immortal weirdos hashing out philosophy amidst an existential crisis during a slow-burn apocalypse road trip, or in cinephile reference terms, two Wim Wenders movies smashed together and dressed up like a Terrence Malick movie, intermittently busting out some superhero beatdown business where the biggest surprise of all might actually be that for all the downplaying of Eternals as an action film in favor of its cinematic mood piece value, which definitely exists, it turns out Chloe Zhao can put together some seriously crunchy, satisfying knock-around battle scene, particularly in terms of how the sound design and location shooting add weight and texture to the oomph when big guns like Don Lee are pounding the crap out of the generally nifty-looking deviants. But yes, to make no mistake, they didn't lie. This is fundamentally a movie about characters who are themselves more heightened metaphors for aspects of the human condition than they are fully human themselves, clearly by intent confronting big existential questions about the nature of life, morality, choice, good and evil, causality, philosophy, and also huge complex science fiction what-ifs massively beyond the scope of anything even the other Marvel movies have ever committed to before. Whether or not it succeeds every time doing that is another story. Eternals is a huge movie with a huge cast, taking huge swings at huge ideas every time someone gets up to bat, and it gets a clear hit most of the time, I think. It does behoove one to remember that there's a gigantic audience that watches Disney and Marvel movies, especially on the younger side, who will be encountering a lot of the bigger metaphysical and existential concepts being raised as plot points by Eternals for the very first time and be utterly blown away by them, and it's hard to argue against that as a positive in and of itself. On the other hand, it's not wrong to wish that there was a little bit more actual meat to the deeper questions here once they're done asking them. Number 6. Titane. And this would be the one that didn't get a full review posted yet, but only because I didn't get to finally see it until a pretty busy time of the year, and maybe that's for the best, so I can just say for now that you should definitely take the recommendation to just see this one knowing as little as possible about it and just go in cold. Yeah, this one's dark, twisted, it's are they serious, exactly what the year needed. Even if you think you know what's coming, I bet you don't. Number 5. ShangChi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Relax, it's good. He's cool, she's cool, she's cool. Some pacing issues in Act 2, but Act 3 makes a quick recovery. Unexpected old-school New Line vibe, being kind of dark in spots, but also closer to a full-out family-friendly fantasy movie than Marvel has done for a while. Overall, it plays out as a refreshingly different enough kung fu action fantasy that's content to send a charismatic new main character through a satisfyingly colorful hero's journey to meet his allies, face his enemies, and gain his powers in a neat and tidy complete package of an adventure before anyone pops in to be like, hey, you know, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's an edible arrangement. You seem like nice people. We're all real friendly here, so if you ever see a block party or quinceañera or, you know, multiversal war crossover event happening, by all means just swing by. The storyline and cast of characters, as realized on screen by the lineup of both fresh and veteran performers and director Daniel Destin Cretton, are all infused with a lived sense of tactile, three-dimensional humanity that feels rooted beyond the screen in subtle passing details that make the film's abundance of small-scale, character-driven scenes feel more connected to the real world than anything in the MCU since the Oakland flashbacks in Black Panther. And the whole general vibe of the film just does a really solid job feeling complete, and yet also, I would really like to see much more of just all of these people and all of this, so mission accomplished, one would suspect. Number 4. Nightmare Alley. This kind of thing is in repertory theater meets cover band territory. The point is to play the hits in a new but different way and watch to see if the players are investing the familiar beats with real humanity between the lines everybody already knows. And the answer is, this time mostly. Don't get me wrong, Nightmare Alley is probably the best version of exactly this that anyone has made in a long time, both in the sense that no one has really been doing full, big, grown-up, noir-style period dramas, and also it's specifically a throwback less to the golden age of the genre itself than to the bizarre aesthetic revival it experienced in the early 1990s, when it seemed like every major studio movie with any kind of genre edge to it had to slather on a 40s Art Deco aesthetic as well because, well, basically because Tim Burton had just done it in Batman and had made more money than anyone had ever seen before, so they figured, hey, maybe that's some kind of magic potion. But if you like movies where, for a change, Willem Dafoe shows up and isn't the only person playing basically every scene in the key of, oh boy, this here is a motion picture, are you excited? I'm excited, while posing haughtily in old-timey dress-up on elaborate sets with really arch monolithic shapes, vaulted ceilings, and a lot more gold leaf in the decoration than you really see here nowadays. In contrast with dark doings and even more ominous music, this is definitely your jam, and it's definitely Del Toro's jam. Number 3, Cyrano. Joe writes Cyrano, a light and breezy period dramedy featuring beloved actor Peter Dinklage in a leading role as a fast-talking romantic action hero who dazzles with wordplay, gets in sword fights, pours his heart out in romantic prose, does spy missions as a soldier, and sings ballads because this is also a musical based on one of the all-time classics of Western literature, though here retooled into somewhat more modernized vernacular English and present-tense sensibilities. Kinda seems like the sort of thing that should be promoted as a bigger deal, right? Like if you were a movie executive and one of your already-in-the-can projects was everybody's favorite actor from Game of Thrones as a swashbuckling hero in a project that falls somewhere between Princess Bride and Bridgerton tonally, you'd probably say, well, shit, that's at least a mid-level moneymaker, right? Get that out sometime other than late January and actually promote. It was actually made over a year ago, but you know, that whole plague thing happened. So it's probably going to have to count on word-of-mouth attraction. Fortunately, it happens to be really good. Even if audiences hadn't been pre-sold on this particular actor as a generational megatalent, it's impossible to watch Dinklage's version of Cyrano burst onto the screen in the first act in a whirlwind introduction that opens with stand-up comedy roast, transitions into dramatic reading, then into a musical number, and ends with a sword fight and not come away thinking, oh, so this is just the coolest guy who's ever lived, and then immediately sympathize with his one sad, relatable hang-up and get invested in the rest of it. Like, you get why he feels like he does, but also you keep saying, dude, I get it, but, you know, tell her, you're like the most awesome guy. If she doesn't see it, screw her.
You so money, don't know it.
But then they wouldn't be doing Cyrano de Bergerac. Number 2, The Green Knight. David Lowery has staked his claim on the American indie film scene as the auteur-director equivalent of a pickup truck full of Nietzsche manuscripts, a unique contemplative voice with one foot in the art house and the other in the smokehouse, except I think he's also vegan, whose films, regardless of genre, strike a strange tone between the playful detached whimsy of postmodernism and the grimy muscular sincerity of whatever you'd call as far opposite that you can go without just straight-up making Panos Cosmatos movies. The Green Knight marks an even further leap into that kind of formalism for formalism's sake atmosphere, taking material that Lowery's apparent narrative leaning towards tales of rough-hewn men making hard decisions in harder worlds feel almost too well suited to here among the most straightforward dad advice fables in the Arthurian, if not Western canon, a lengthy quest narrative whose moral nonetheless boils down to, bro, you gotta take your hits like a man, and processing it backwards into the fog of myth from whence one imagines it came, through filters of tone and texture that owe more to the Brothers Grimm than Thomas Mallory, with extremely fair helpings of John Borman's Excalibur layered on top. The kind of medieval storytelling adaptation that's at once very literal and also answers anyone who ever asked, what were they on when they wrote this, with lots of things. Everything was bad for you back then, the weather was terrible, everyone was sick all the time, nobody knew shit about medicine, chemicals, or food preservation, most people were slowly going mad and dying all the time from one thing or another that rotted your brain, and that's why they believed in wizards. So if you like your swords and sorcery to pair better with a black light and a bong hit, well, he is called the Green Knight after all, and he certainly does look like he jumped right off a poster in the back area of a Spencer's Gifts. A tremendous amount of the actual gravitas ends up falling to the forever underrated Patel, who definitely has to sell the audience on the reality, unreality, and seriousness of everything happening in a given scene to get our bearings. Nothing going on here is precisely familiar, relatable, or feels right in the slightest, which is the point, so it's pretty much up to him to communicate how we're supposed to feel. You know, okay bro, that guy's a tree, scale of 1 to 10, how unusual is that in this reality in a given moment, and still be a functioning occupant of the story itself as a complicated, somewhat quiet, compelling, but not always all that likable of a main character. That's a heavy order, and he makes it work, particularly in sequences far removed from the rest of his arc in the third act, which are best left to be discovered. It's a hell of a performance that'll hopefully keep the awards committees arguing almost as long as Arthurian mythology scholars are arguing over the rest of it. Number 1, Benedetta. Whereas Elle was more like dressing up a dark revenge whodunit in the trappings of a first much more subdued meditative suburban drama that only gradually revealed, oh, we're not dealing with who or what we initially thought we were, are we? Director Paul Verhoeven's latest, with a cadre of respected actresses, including from that very film, is aiming more directly at the target of here's the kind of semi-true events that inspired the so-called nunsploitation genre of softcore sex and violence films of the 70s and 80s throughout the European grindhouse circuit. Maybe since it's 2021, we got a few classy actors to turn up a more upmarket version of, oh, no, we're just doing the more expensive version of exactly that, huh? So yeah, in case you were expecting the Mad Dutchman to show up on the 21st Century Festival circuit with this material and hand in something other than an attempt at A Man for All Seasons of blasphemous finger-banging potboilers, no, that's exactly what he's offering here, an over-the-top tale of entirely too good-looking for the mid-1600s French actresses shedding their habits, shrieking while possessed by Christ, demons, the blessed virgins, the throes of sapphic passion, or all of the above, and engaging in acts both carnal and surreal, sometimes as dream sequence, sometimes as reality, in the context of internecine backstabbings and also front stabbing that frames convent life and church politics is a mix of lesbian boarding school romantic melodrama and mean girls power jockeying with a garnish of backstage dramatics a la Black Swan and or The Red Shoes, or if one prefers the more direct inside joke, they might note that the eventual Queen Bee power play plot and focus on elaborate liturgical stagecraft so central to Renaissance Catholicism ultimately means he's just kinda made showgirls again, but with hot nuns this time, and geez, Paul, you know, I didn't even get you a card last year. What a guy, I'll tell ya.
Dieu te guidera.
Renonce à ta vanité. Bravo!
Dieu te parlera dans beaucoup de langues. C'est mes frères.
Any good?
Very good.
It won the Academy Award
Oh, for what?
for best movie ever made.